video games are for nerds. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about them. That's why you're listening to The Week in Gaming, the only gaming podcast that breaks down the last 7 days and tears games apart from the inside. Ugh. So forget your worries, open your ears, and join Simon Miller and a co-host for the entertainment chatter you need. Also, screw Dark Souls.
Hello and welcome to the returning Week in Gaming, which, as you know, comes and goes as it pleases, but not anymore, because I'm going to sort that out. But anyway, my name is Simon Miller, if you don't know. This is a podcast about video games, which hopefully was clear from the title, and boy, do I have a show for you today. Before we get into it, though, we do have a very special guest on this week's podcast. He's an awesome human being, because he did go to patreon.com/Simon316, and he lovingly supports my crazy content, which is a wonderful thing to do. But it is my man Sam who joins me today. How you doing, my friend?
Yeah, not doing too bad, thanks. It's been good to be on the podcast, and I look forward to seeing more of it, obviously.
Yeah, well, it's back now, and people won't believe me, but, you know, the only way you can prove... It's like the boy who cried wolf, right? The only way I can prove people wrong is by being murdered by that wolf, and then only in my death, in my martyrdom, will people understand what happened. So, I mean... There is only really one thing we can start talking about in games at the moment, because it came, it's like a wave, right? It's come and it's stolen everything away. It's kind of like when a Grand Theft Auto game gets released. When a GTA gets released, everything else stops and people just focus on this. And what has basically happened in the last 10 days of video games is everything else has stopped. And the loot box issue, controversy, whatever word you want to give it. I think there's probably pros and cons depending how you look at it. Has taken over video games. And as we talk this evening on Monday the 20th of November at about 6 o'clock, I mean, the latest is basically this. These are the three things that we'll get into. Battlefront 2, if you don't know, obviously came out with a progression system that was very, very heavy on getting people to buy things and you know, investing in the game. It seems very likely that Disney and Lucas got involved to try and save... I guess, protect the Star Wars brand. And the latest thing, obviously, is that Lucas came out today and said, look, Star Wars has always been about the fans. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We didn't think this was particularly fair to the fans. Now, not only did this change Battlefront 2, in the sense that they did completely redo the system, under the radar, EA have also changed Need for Speed, which had not necessarily a similar system to that, but kind of tick the same boxes. And on top of that, the rumor is that in terms of physical sales, Battlefront 2 has sold 60% down over Battlefront that came out in 2015. Obviously, we don't know what digital sales are going to be, but you can't imagine that 60% is a big number. So that's a lot of information to take in. Obviously, it's caused waves throughout the industry. We'll start off simple, Sam. How do you feel about this craziness? You're a gamer. You're loving all this stuff. But now the loot boxes have come and they're killing us all. But yeah, where do you come down on the whole thing?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things, like you always hear people saying, oh, we should boycott them, but it never happens. But it seems like lots of people have actually not bought this game because, well, you don't know it's because of this controversy, but one would probably assume that was the case. And but yeah, I don't think it's as black and white as saying like someone at EA is being very greedy and has influenced this. But obviously it's a misguided decision, obviously. And, you know, it got the most downvoted comment on Reddit history when they talked about Darth Vader.
I forgot about that, yeah.
Because, like, for those who don't know, Darth Vader is behind a 40-hour paywall, is it? A 40-hour grinding, you could pay to unlock it. Basically.
Well, it's the latter part that I get confused about, because nobody seemed to actually understand whether you could pay for the heroes or not. And that's where I really got confused, because the sort of information that was really hammered home to me is that you can't actually pay to unlock the characters, but you can pay to help progress through the game faster, which then obviously helps you unlock the characters. And I actually thought, I mean, maybe this is a controversial thing to say, I actually thought it would have made more sense if they'd just gone, you want to pay to unlock the characters? Just pay to unlock the characters. Now, that's terrible, because if you're playing a Star Wars game, you should not have to pay extra money to unlock Darth Vader. I mean, that is mad. That is like having a racing game and saying you don't have a steering wheel. Like, if you want to turn, you've got to buy it. But I think that's the problem to me, is the messaging was bad, and the whole system was confusing to begin with. And it was just, I mean, it's just crazy, to be completely honest. And I'm glad you touched upon the whole, because usually the argument is if you don't want it, vote with your vote with your wallet, right? That's what people say. And usually they don't. And that, let's face it, that's why these loot boxes exist in the first place. I mean, Activision right now, I bet, are doing backflips. No one's talking about the World War II or the Call of Duty WW2 loot boxes. And they're there. And they've been there for ages. But this one, I think, was so garish and so in people's faces. I mean, these things always blow up, right? And it does always seem to be EA. And I think this is just that point.
Yeah, it's crazy because some people are saying they did because they dialed it back a lot. They removed loot boxes temporarily and they reduced costs and stuff. And some people, it seems a bit conspiracist to be like they did stuff extra bad just to dial it back to regular bad, just so they would get away with it. I don't know if that's really the case because that seems a bit far-fetched. I don't think they're monsters, you know what I mean?
That's the first I've heard of it as well. So it was actually what sort of like conspiracy theories that they thought what we'll do is we'll really screw it up, and then when we take it back to just a bit screwed up, everybody will be over the moon.
Yeah, and some people are saying that EA, it makes that like they did this just so they could seem like heroes just for righting the wrong when it was still wrong anyway. So I'm not sure how true that is. I think people get carried away because obviously it's a bad situation, but people then to balloon it into the worst situation ever, and then because I mean, I'm not going to pass any comment on EA, but they're a very easy company to criticize. They're an easy target. It's low-hanging fruit.
I totally agree, right? Because I mean, again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, and I do understand. I do understand the differences between that and Battlefront 2. I mean, I'm quite comfortable saying that I think in terms of loot boxes, Battlefront 2 is the most aggressive one yet, or at least up there. However, something like Overwatch came out, which does. I know that it's different. I'm not saying it's the same, and it's no real different from DLC when you think about it. But again, as you mentioned, I do think EA sometimes get it a bit harsh than other people, because I think you could throw some of the same criticisms at something like Overwatch, but nobody really has. And if anything, that's kind of where all this started. You know, Blizzard introduced that with that. Everyone seemed okay with it, made a boat ton of money. So other publishers were like, well, if they're... And that's always the way it works, right? Again, it goes back to the whole thing. If you're a business and you see another business doing well, you think, well, we should integrate that business practice so that we can, you know, make the gains that we need. Because, I mean, I think we all forget that when it does come to games or any kind of form of entertainment, the people running this stuff is running it as a business at the end of the day. That's what's the most important thing. They need cash. And let's face it, these loot boxes do make a ton of cash. So, you know, where do you go? What do you do with it? What would you do? I put you in charge of EA, right? Tomorrow, I ring you up and I say, Sam, somehow I've got you in charge of EA. What's the first thing you do?
Well, I mean, I assume you're asking, what do I do about the loot box situation? It's just like, you can't ring them up and be like, take them all out. We are crusading against everyone, because that, you know, it is a business after all. And, you know, Blizzard have made a lot of money from loot boxes and so have Take-Two and everything. So it's hard because you need to balance that. And I don't know how you do that, because on the one hand, you need to keep them in some majority, because otherwise if you just release a game and then don't do anything with it, that's, you know, you have to rely just on the money from the game, sales-wise. But you don't want to increase the aggression, because that's horrible PR, increase the aggression of the loot boxes. So I really don't know what you do. I really don't.
No, I don't either. I mean, I find it really hard to balance. I imagine that some people at EA, well, again, they did go too far. I think now, in hindsight, I think a lot of people at EA must just be thinking, why didn't we just do what everybody else was doing? Because I really do think if they had done what COD or Overwatch or anything like that has done, they wouldn't be here right now. I really don't think so. I think the argument would have continued to rage, and, you know, the classic retort would have always been, well, look, people are buying them, man. So, you know, what do you want them to do? But I think EA just pushed it. They did. They pushed it too far. Well, clearly they pushed it too far.
I think what it is just the rest of it was in a grey area. Like Shadow of War, it's like I'm not too comfortable having to pay in the single player game, but, you know, it's not pay to win. You know, it's still blurry. But here, it was black and white. You could pay for Darth Vader, or you can grind 40 hours to unlock him. Whereas if they'd have said you can grind to unlock Darth Vader, people would have been like, oh, that's annoying, but whatever. But you could also pay for cosmetic items. They, like you said, they wouldn't have been in the situation. It's just the pay-to-win formula that really gets people annoyed.
Yeah, I think so. Especially, the problem is as well, you're dealing with iconic characters here. I think that is a real issue, because, I mean, it does get. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit over the top, but it does get, especially with Star Wars, where they're so ingrained into the experience you do kind of get into that area where it's like you cannot muck around with these things. They mean too much to people as well, and I think that's why when we tie back into the whole Lucas thing coming out and saying, look, it's always been about the fans. Now, how they can argue that, I don't know. I've watched episode 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars. They weren't for the fans. I don't know who the hell they were for, but it's but there is a point to that in the sense that when something is that big and has and speaks to people on the level that Star Wars does, you really can't muck around with it too much. Like, you really can't. And I'm amazed that EA didn't see that coming, to be honest. Yeah. It surprises me.
And especially you would have thought after the backlash, they got a lot of backlash with the first game because it didn't have a lot of content, full price game, and then they charged DLC up for 4 installments.
I forgot about that. No space battles, right? That was the big thing with Battlefront. There's no space battles, and everyone went crazy about that.
You would have thought after because everyone was excited about this until the loot box controversy, because it seemed like they were undoing the mistakes of the first game, and now it's gotten even worse. You would have thought they'd just be like, we can't have any more controversy surrounding Battlefront, and yet here we are.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I mean, do you think this could affect? I mean, I don't know what the legality of it is, so we'll put that to one side. But do you think this could affect, EA's relationship with Star Wars in terms of the licensing?
Well, I've heard rumblings that Disney aren't too happy, but I mean, you don't know until official release is made or whatever. But I mean, it could do, because if you mess around with Star Wars, that's bad. Like, it's probably reflecting bad on Star Wars just before the release of The Last Jedi.
Yeah,
which is not ideal.
And surely, if you're in charge at Disney as well, over the last 2 months, your video game partner has told you, right, this standalone single player game we're working on at Visceral, we're shutting that studio down, so that's dead. So, whatever money you ploughed into that, don't worry about it. Oh, also, we've just released sort of the big Star Wars game that, that we've been smashing for the last 2 years. We've screwed that up as well. Like, surely there's got to be... And I mean, I think the weird thing is that in many situations, especially with licensees, I mean, not FIFA or anything like that, but, EA would carry some weight. But you can't fight with Disney. Ain't no one fighting with Disney, man. Disney win. I mean, clearly Disney win, because, like you say, if the rumour that Disney rang them up and said, you got to stop this, and they just stop it straight away... That goes to show who holds the cards in this situation. Yeah.
I think the one of the big things is that a lot of people aren't hearing about the quality of the game. I haven't heard anyone say, the game's actually quite good, because that's true. All you're hearing. It's washing out everything else, and that's what they don't want, because I'm sure it's a very good game, but nobody's talking about that.
That's such a good point. I have no idea whether it's good or not. That is such a good... I don't even think I've seen... Well, I think I've seen review scores, but everyone has been caveated with, this is because of the progression system, this is because of the progression system. I don't know if I know the single player campaign is apparently short, about 6 hours. Some people are annoyed about that. But outside of that, I have no idea if it's a good multiplayer game or not. None. Yep. That's terrible. Do you think, going back to the sales before we kind of move on, do you think, so 60% down over Battlefront physical sales? I mean, I never really know, and I think this is a good litmus test for the whole thing. You see a lot of people shouting about it on Reddit and Twitter, and obviously when you get the most downvoted post ever, I think that gives you more evidence. But I always think, is this just an echo chamber? Even with stuff like that, I think, is it really going to penetrate into the more mainstream market? Just because I don't know, I mean, do you think it's a coincidence, or do you actually think there's probably a connection here?
I think it's really hard to tell, because physical sales are going down anyway.
Well, that's it, yeah.
In general, so it could be like the worst coincidence for EA in the world, or it could be. Well, I don't think you can have that much less and then blame it on coincidence. It's got to be to do with the controversy, and there's literally even people who have no idea about this progression system are jumping on this system because they don't want pay to win. They don't know what the conversation is, but they're hearing Battlefront 2 is pay to win. I'm against that, but. Yeah, like you say, you weren't too... not everyone is as upset. Everyone seems to be at a 10 right now, but some people are at a 6 and may still buy the game. But the whole wave of, negativity might just be driving everyone away.
There could be. I mean, that's the thing. I'd still buy it. I don't know what that says about me, but then again, maybe because in my head, I'm not going to pay for any of that stuff. I'm just not. I'm not that. I've never done it. I've never had the desire to do it. And the only reason I would buy it is to play with my mates and because I like Star Wars.
Yeah, and the first game was very good.
It was, yeah. And I don't know whether that makes me part of the problem or not. I mean, I guess it does to a certain degree, but as much as I am against it in terms of it clearly doesn't work, I don't know. It's not enough for me going, well, I'm still going to get it because I just want to have some fun with my friends. I guess it depends how you look at it. I mean, that's probably keeping it more in the entertainment space as opposed to what does need to be seen from a political point of view. I think it'd be really interesting to see what the digital sales are, because if the figures come out and somehow digital sales are 60% up, then EA can just say, man, we don't give a crap. We've just broken all kinds of records here. So, you know, we're the kings of digital sales. But I mean, I don't see it happening, to say the least.
Yeah, and I had an interesting opinion. I can't remember where I heard it from, but it's just like EA Access has actually just bitten them in the ass, because everyone heard about this who had EA Access and Origin Access, and then before a launch, everyone was saying all this. So even before the game was out on general sale and they could make any money from it, everyone was saying about these systems that they hated.
It's just, I mean, that really is setting yourself up for a fall, isn't it? Because you give people that early access and then straight away it's like, haha. Well, it's true, because I knew about all of that before the reviews dropped. I was well aware of the controversy that was about to hit. And that wasn't just from talking to people that I knew that were reviewing it. That was just, you could feel it. You could feel it building on the internet. And then it was just 3 or 4 days of absolute madness. Well, that's what anybody wanted to talk about. And it just smashed everything.
Yeah.
And now here we are with the remnants of poor sales. You know, EA changing other games. Like we said, Need for Speed's been changed. Disney and Lucasfilm got involved. And yeah, as you pointed out, 3 weeks away from the launch of Star Wars The Last Jedi. I mean, I guess it doesn't affect that. However, it probably does affect it in the sense that come December, Star Wars love is gonna peak like it always does. Probably when you want to try sell some video games, and maybe it doesn't happen this time. Maybe the stigma is too bad.
Yeah. What's more worrying, I think, is that now if you're looking to do this kind of stuff again with loot boxes, you're going to make it more covert and more like you're not going to be as in your face about it. Yeah. So we might see this again, but the wall might be more over your eyes, if you know what I mean.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But nobody wants a repeat of this. Nobody wants this.
Oh no, I can't imagine anybody saying, man, let's get a piece of this action. This would be awesome. But that's the point, and I think that's when it gets interesting, because loot boxes aren't going away. They're just not. Like I say, Activision makes a load for them. Overwatch is making a load for them. Blizzard. Yeah, there's. I don't know how Shadows of War did overall. I know that's kind of where the tipping point happened to a certain extent. But I would imagine they did very well for them as well, would be my guess. So, yeah, exactly. It's like, is it? Maybe people just need to be more transparent, but I don't think they will go that way. I think they'll go your way. I think they'll just come up with more ways to make them seem, they're harmless. They're just harmless little things where actually they're not. I wouldn't feel as strongly about it as I did if the sales hadn't have dropped. Because I've always been, I'm not saying I like this, but I've always have been of the mindset that as it is a business, if Battlefront had sold, it's 100% up physical copies and we're making millions of dollars in microtransactions, I'd be like, well, how can you moan about it? People are buying it. A business is only successful when there's a demand for it. However, it hasn't gone that way this time, so it will be interesting.
Have you seen how much Take-Two make from microtransactions?
I don't. Do you have an actual figure, or is it just?
It's something like 80%, something like that. Oh, and that's from GTA Online and purely. But nobody complains about GTA Online's microtransactions because it's not like it's sort of like it's there if you need it sort of thing, like you say. So yeah, but they are making a killing off of them, and they're not facing much backlash for it. You get a few people saying like, I don't want to buy the GTA dollars, but I really want the tank or whatever.
So I'm going to get the GTA dollars.
Yeah.
Well, again, man, horses for courses. It's the one thing that is very prevalent in video games is that a rule for someone is not the rule for somebody else, and unfortunately here it was just a recipe for disaster, and a company that people love to shit on anyway made a really, really bad choice. I mean, that is the recipe we had here, and it's all come tumbling down.
Yeah.
Right, before we do get into other stuff that came out this week, what have you specifically been playing this week, Sam? Any new releases, any old stuff? What's been floating your gaming boat?
I've been playing Skyrim VR a lot.
Well, look, you just tied that in wonderfully, because that is what I wanted to talk about as well. Because not only has Skyrim come out in VR, it's also come out on Nintendo Switch, so you can now wander around wherever you want to go. How is Skyrim on VR? I mean, I played Fallout 4... very briefly at a demo session a few months ago, and I was very impressed. I'm imagining that Skyrim VR is kind of the same, but I experienced it for 5 minutes. I'm guessing you've locked yourself in for maybe hours at the moment. I don't know. I mean, how's it working out?
Well, it's one of those things. I went into it very skeptical about VR. I'm not one of those people who's like, VR is so bad, because you do get those kinds of people.
Yes, you do.
But I've played a lot of things that seemed a bit tech demoy. I could only last for about half an hour in at most, and then I had to just take the headset off. But this impressed me. Like, it sounds so dumb to say, but it is totally the world of Skyrim transformed into VR. There's no bells and whistles. You go in here and you're like, okay, I've seen all this content. So the content-wise, if you're jumping back in, it's nothing to be like, wow, in terms of the actual game, because it's all exactly the same. But it's really good. From everything from the controls to the immersion factor to the it sounds so lame, but the feeling of being in there. I'm one of these people, when people say like, oh, it feels like you're really in the game, and you just get a bit like face. Yeah, you just get a bit like, oh, all right, okay. But like when you're casting, flames with your left move controller and then like slashing dudes with your right move controller, it is really awesome. So yeah, I think it's really good. And obviously the graphical downgrade is there. You've probably seen this in other VR games. To get the smooth frame rate, everything else looks a bit terrible.
Yeah.
But that's fine. It's not something it's sort of something you can criticize the medium for, not the game. But yeah, no, very impressive, very surprisingly impressive as well.
I mean, Bethesda are going to smash it with that, surely, because they've got to be the type of games you want to play in VR, because they're immersive with a controller in your hand. So yeah. I mean, my big thing was how long have you lasted in it so far? What's your longest session been?
An hour so far, and it's only been because I've had other stuff to do. It's not been like, oh, I need to get out of this.
I need to run away.
I have glasses, and it is actually not amazingly comfortable for hours with glasses, because it does push on your face a little bit. But yeah, no, it's all fine. It's not like I had to get out of here because I feel ill. It's all optimized very well. And it's actually got number 19 in the charts, which doesn't sound high, but for a VR game that requires a headset and everything, it is really good.
Especially because VR kits at the moment haven't really penetrated, I think, as many people wanted them to. So we're still at that early times. That excites me though, because that was always my thing. Is that I actually would love to get lost there. I mean, not to the point that I forget who I am or anything like that. That's my other worry. Is I forget that I'm actually in a game and it's like, oh, that's the end of me. But I think it's these type of games that I've been waiting for, in the sense that. Yeah, I just the idea of it just really appeals. Like, it just does. Like, Skyrim and Fallout are fun to play anyway. But to be honest, I've said this loads of years almost, is that the Bethesda template wasn't necessarily running thin, but I think I was getting a bit bored of it just because the amount of hours that you do put in. Whereas now, I think the whole VR thing almost gives it life again. Or at least that's what it feels like to me. Yeah, for sure. I think it's just a case of it makes an existing formula feel fresh, fresh and familiar. That's the thing, because when you use the move controllers, like when you're firing an arrow, you hold your bow and then you pull the arrow back and everything, and the tracking isn't amazing, but the fact that you can actually do that in a game, it is really cool. And I don't think you're going to get lost in a world because of all the fuzzy textures just yet. Exactly.
But then it is one of those things take it off. Oh, it must be 11:30. Oh no, it's 1. So you do get that kind of thing. But yeah, no, it's really good. And like you say, Fallout, I haven't actually played Fallout yet myself. But yeah, it's with that and Skyrim. I can imagine when Fallout comes out, you get a bundle with Skyrim and Fallout, and you have hours of entertainment for the PSVR. And I can imagine sales will boost as well.
That sounds wonderful to me. And you literally can. I mean, it gets to the point where you literally can be like, all right, do you want to live in crazy nuclear world? Or do you want to come and live in medieval world? I mean, I just think that's great. Is it scary as well? And that's a stupid question to say. But I did used to get a bit freaked out when there's certain vaults and there's certain caves in both those games which aren't exactly comfortable. And have you done anything that in VR? Because surely in VR that must be horrendous.
Well, I should caveat this by saying I'm scared of spiders. Really scared of spiders. Right. And at the opening, and I was like. Because when I played it, originally, or when I've watched Harry Potter and stuff, it's been like, okay, it's a spider, I'm not great, or whatever. And then, but in VR, oh no, it is the worst. Because you go in there and they drop from the ceiling and they jump at you. And it's not jumping at the screen, it's jumping in your actual face. And it's horrible. But yeah, no, you do get those moments. And when your companion's right next to you, you turn around and you're like, whoa, they're right there in front of your face. So yeah, it is not horror, it's not like Kitchen, but yeah, it is scary. It's immersive. That's the joy of it, though, because that's what you're meant to feel when spider drop from the ceiling in a cave. So
it's 100% right. I think that's just my thing, that I'm intrigued to see how I deal with, because there were moments in Fallout, especially. I can't remember whatever that vault in Fallout 3 was. That was absolutely horrendous. Was like, man, I'm not enjoying this. Well, I am, but like at the same time, I'm on edge. And then to put a VR headset on and be like, oh great, now I'm actually here. Well, that's just spiffing, isn't it? Yeah. I also, it's just the fact those games. I mean, what's the average time people put into those games? 100 hours. Yeah, that's nuts to me. 100 hours with the VR. I mean, I'm intrigued. I really, really am intrigued. So it's good to hear that you're having a good time with it, to say the least.
Yeah, what I think would be nice if it was a sort of thing where you could have the game like Resident Evil 7, like sort of maybe turn VR on and off. Because sometimes you might be like, oh, I don't fancy doing this bit in VR. That would be nice, but not really like a big criticism.
That would be good, actually. That's got to be on the cards eventually, surely.
Well, it's a separate sale, so I don't know how they do that.
Well, that's true. That would make sense. I'd like that. I just think it's like the whole when you've got what do you call it? Like a remaster game, and you can sort of have I like that. That sometimes you're like, I'll just go muck around with it. I'll go muck around with how it used to be, even though this makes no sense. I could have done this regardless before dropping £20. As you have brought up remasters as well, just to segue into it. I've been playing I've been playing LA Noire on the Switch this week. Now, I admit I am biased. Like, I know a lot of people were very critical of LA Noire when it came out. I loved it. I absolutely it spoke to me. It did everything I wanted to do. Admittedly, I'm very easily pleased. If I like something, it doesn't take much to win me over. And the thing for me is, I mean, you just mentioned that people make excuses for some of the VR stuff. Well, you don't make excuses, but the texture thing, right? You go, well, I don't mind that the textures are lower because it's VR, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable excuse. Something else that I'm finding with the Nintendo Switch stuff is that, look, I've seen LA Noire running on the Xbox One X and the PlayStation 4, and it looks pretty good. On the Nintendo Switch, it doesn't look as good. However, here's the thing. I get to take it wherever the hell I go, and a lot of people don't seem to think that's a fair trade, whereas for me, I mean, I don't really give a shit about, super graphics, I guess. But to me, being able to take it wherever I go is ultimately the balance there. Ultimately, 100%. And like even today I was chatting to somebody about it who literally said, at what point will people stop using portability as an excuse for Switch being underpowered? It's like, but that's a wonderful excuse. I bought FIFA on my Switch this year because I can take it wherever I go. Like, that to me is such a big benefit of that machine. I don't understand. Honestly, LA Noire as well. Like, it's the same game. There's been a few tweaks. There's now collectibles in there, new collectibles in there, and instead of accuse, whatever the three choices were, it's now good cop, bad cop, and accuse, which makes a lot more sense because Cole Phelps does have some kind of anger management problem where he just freaks out when you thought you were giving some kind of nice bit of dialogue and he goes mental. So at least that it makes a lot more sense in that way. And to me, LA Noire wasn't. A lot of people focus on the facial technology, but for me, the thing I loved about LA Noire is it was just a really good cop story. You were a cop. You were making your way through the LAPD. The investigations were good. The homicide chapter was amazing, and it had adult themes because you were dealing with these cases that were based on. I think they're based on real life things, right? Or am I making that up? I can't remember. Either way, they felt
it's fully inspired by.
Yeah, exactly. That's a better way to put it, and that's. That is something you don't want to make a kid play. And I saw it come out, and again now I saw so much negativity towards it. I just don't understand why. It genuinely, first time round, I would consider giving it, as good a score as I possibly could have done. But I guess you haven't played. Have you played the new ones or just the old one you played?
I've played the old one a little bit, but I was until like a few years ago, I was very impatient. So like anything that was very, very story heavy, I was like, oh, boring. But I do really want to revisit it now, which is the good thing, and I can do on the go, which is why I intend to get it on the Switch.
Yeah, exactly.
But I've got a question about it, which is like, does it? You say about the facial animations, people focus on that, but does that mean if you're a modern day gamer who hadn't played it in the first place, would you come into it and then be like, ugh, this is awful?
I don't think you'd think it was awful. I think you'd be really harsh to think it was awful. I think you'd probably look at the Switch version and go, okay, it looks a bit. I mean, it's fine when you're playing it on the actual Switch itself. Maybe when you dock it and look at it on your TV, you'll notice that, maybe it looks a bit downgraded. I hate that term, but yes, I think that's fair. However, it still plays great, and the facial stuff remains. You can actually see. you can see people lying and you can see people telling the truth. Like, that hasn't suffered at all. And I think that's because that's emotion, right? We're going to get all wanky now, like indie developers. But that's emotion, right? And that's the emotion that we're all used to. So it doesn't matter if the face looks a bit janky. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. I can still see that you look a bit shifty, or you look happy, or you look calm.
Yeah.
And that so the essence of the game. And to me, like I say, the really good thing was that homicide chapter where you were dealing with these gruesome stuff. You don't lose anything with that. So I don't know what the problem is. And to me, especially because, L.A. Noire, I think the reason I loved it so much was it felt like a modern-day point-and-click game. And I love point-and-click games. And they're all but dead, especially in 2017. I mean, there's a few here and there. Maybe actually more now than there was a few years ago. But that, to me, is exactly the type of thing that I want to have on the go. Exactly. A point-and-click game where I can do a case here, now I'll put it down. I want to train later, I'll do another case. So it's just, I don't understand. I mean, maybe, look, the negative voices are always louder than the positive voices. I'm hoping there's a lot of people out there that are either replaying or discovering L.A. Noire for the first time and having a great time with it. But I certainly do not understand this argument that Nintendo should be held to some kind of... be brought to task because their games it's underpowered. I'm happy to take... Look, I've got I don't have, but, Xbox Ones and PS4s exist. I don't need a Nintendo Switch that does all that same stuff. I need something different, and that's what it offers me.
Yeah, and it is the trade-off. It's not an excuse, it's a trade-off, because you can't have that power. Imagine how big the Switch would be if it could do the same capabilities, but on the go. Like, you're trading it off for this nice slim machine that you can still play L.A. Noire on. Like, if you go back to 2011, you were like, in 6 years, you'll be able to play this game entirely on the go. And people would have been like, are you serious? That would be so cool.
Exactly, what are you talking about?
Because it is cool, because I'm getting all these games now, because I'm like, when I go on flights, when I go on trains, when I go on long journeys, I can now play this on the go, and then when I get back, I can play on my TV too. Because so a lot of my games I'm finding, if it is a Switch version, I will go for that instead. Yeah. Because of the portability, because it's just so cool to be able to play that, multiplayer with the Joy-Cons, or on the go, like you say, with games that are a big size, Skyrim, Doom, L.A. Noire. And if you've missed these games the first time around, you're then getting a revitalized sort of lifespan.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got, stuff like Wolfenstein coming out next year as well.
Exactly.
That to me is much more appealing when I can take it on the go. Like, every time it's the same thing. So I don't understand that. But yeah, I think L.A. Noire is really good. I think if you're into the whole adventure game, dangling carrot kind of gameplay where you keep, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? I think it ticks every box. I think it's 1947 it's set, or it's the 40s. I think the 1940s setting is awesome. The soundtrack is awesome. It's got that Rockstar magic just, poured all over it. I think it's wonderful. I still think it's wonderful now. How the hell
did you download it, by the way?
No, I didn't. I got a physical. I'm still that guy. I'm still.
I'm that guy too, and it was a huge download.
Oh, really? How big?
I think you needed more than the Switch came with, so you needed enough.
I saw someone talking about that. You need and there's another criticism I saw. It said, I can't believe you need an SD card to download this. I'm like, well, that's just the world we live in, man. Like,
it's the same. It's a big game. Like, it's not like Mario or whatever. It's a huge open world game.
Oh, exactly. And also, the Xbox One X is you get a 1 terabyte hard drive with it, right? The Xbox One X.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like 8 games, and then what are you going to do? So it's not a Switch problem. That is the world of digital downloads and games problems that we're going to have to figure out at some point. But how we do that, I've got no idea. I don't have the
micro
answer.
SD cards are not really that expensive, to be honest.
No,
so
I think you can still buy it boxed if you really want to. That's I get it. It's not as fun. It's not as cool. It's not as quick. But it's still an option if that really does bother you. So yeah, I have been playing that. What else? There's something else that I wanted to talk about that we kind of touched upon. And now my brain, I think it was Elder Scrolls 5, but we have talked about that. Everyone's going nuts that Rocket League came out on Switch as well, just we're talking about the Switch. I admit now, I don't really get Rocket League. Like, I say that really quietly. I don't really get it, but let's never say that to anybody else.
Yeah, everyone loves it. I've gone back into it recently on PS4, and it's sort of the perfect game for the Switch, because, like, I mean, split screen is probably a little bit horrendous on that little screen.
Exactly,
but it's one of those things, like, do you want to just have a game of Rocket League, snap the Joy-Cons off, there you go. And good, I mean, like, as much as you don't get it, a lot of people do.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It's got loads of esports, and so yeah, I think it's going to be really good on the Switch.
Don't get me wrong.
Only be a good thing.
I think it's a wonderful game.
Yeah.
It's just for me when I sat down, I was a bit like, oh, Okay.
It's one of those games that when you're really bad at, it's just no fun.
Well,
it's one of those things like when everyone's just bouncing around, flying around off the walls, and you're just sort of doing nothing and doing circles in the middle. You're like, I don't find this very fun.
Yeah, this is rubbish. Also, Resident Evil Revelations 1 and 2 come out in Switch in a week as well. And they are good games, man. They are, honestly, they are underrated Resident Evil games. They're not going to change your life. But again, I think the Switch is I think its library is really building up. I really do. I mean, in this week alone, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about. I've just seen it. However, we'll segue here. Batman, the Telltale series, finally gets the Switch as well. And I think that's a wonderful game to play on the Switch. And also, to jump straight into it, I think today it came out, is the third episode of Season 2, Fractured Mask, I think it's called. Have you played any of the Batman Telltale series?
I haven't. No, I've been interested to, but not got around to it yet.
It's a weird game. I don't like talking about them too much because I completely understand you don't want to know anything, right? That's the whole point. So you're actually trying to break them down critically is really hard. But all I will say is that I liked the first 2 episodes and I felt they were building somewhere interesting. With episode 3, it does feel like it's fallen by the wayside a bit. Basically, what Telltale has done is they've become way too ambitious. They've introduced way too many Batman characters and way too many plot threads. So every time I sit down, I'm like, I have no idea what the hell's going on. And the whole thing with the whole sort of overarching story with season 3, and this has been on all the trailers, so I don't think it's just not a spoiler. It's not. It's everywhere. Is that Bruce Wayne has to? I mean, this is just Batman through and through, to be honest. But Bruce Wayne has to infiltrate kind of the evil side of Gotham, and he has to make sure he balances all his relationships. And in a Telltale game, that is really important because it depends on what you say and your actions. You'll be judged. In episode 3 especially, all of a sudden people hated me that I'd spent nothing. It was nice for them the entire time. And they turn around and they're like, oh, you piece of shit. And I was like, I haven't done anything. What are you mad at me for? And that really does take you out the experience because you think, well, what was I meant to do? And then, by the end of it, I don't really think it paid off in the way that it meant to. I felt like that anyway. So it was a bit of a shame. It's a bit of a show. I do like the game, and I really like what they do with Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne comes across like a unique version of Bruce Wayne, and in 2017 with Batman, that is huge.
Yeah.
But, it's overly convoluted. There's too many stories. I kind of feel... I mean, I know Telltale went through some hard times recently, so I don't like ragging on them too much, but purely from this game, this was the first one I'm like, oh, man, maybe this is the beginning, the end for this idea, because it's just not really working.
Yeah.
So, have you ever got into any of the Telltale games? I imagine you probably did Walking Dead. Most people did that.
No, actually, that's on my list. I got one of those Humble bundles, and it's just like all of them. And then it's like, I'll get around to playing that. I played none of them.
The good thing about that is that it doesn't age, man. You can play that whenever. That really is a wonderful video game.
Yeah, and I've got Minecraft, the Telltale experience, one of my flights when I was just sort of like, I want a narrative experience I can just sort of like go for. I don't care if it's not that good. And then it was okay. I got I think I understand the Telltale formula now. Press these options, and then they'll remember that, and then that's all cool, and that's fine. But everyone keeps telling me about The Walking Dead. But it's one of those things like not many people bite your ear off about it anymore. Whereas I don't want to watch Stranger Things right now because everyone's being like, watch Stranger Things. So once that passes, it's nice to get to it when nobody's harassing you.
Totally agree. I did exactly the same thing. I waited until people stopped talking about it before I played it. And I'm lucky in the sense that I've somehow managed to balance my social media where no one spoils anything for me. Yeah. I mean, I don't care about spoilers anyway, which is the real joke. But no one spoils anything for me, so it's like I don't care.
Yeah.
The one other thing I did want to touch upon, because I want to see, if I'm just going to ask you, it's such an open question, I don't think you'll know the answer. But do you know which big franchise has released 2 massive games this week for the 3DS?
I couldn't even begin to guess.
So there's two new Pokemon games out, right?
I was going to guess Pokemon. I didn't want to be that guy. Like, no Pokemon, obviously.
Honestly,
okay.
Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon came out this week, and I had absolutely no clue. Now that's probably a bigger, a mirror into my life as opposed to anything else. Yeah. But they've already dominated the world, and I had no idea. And I was like, how the hell have I missed this? So I just wanted to get... I mean, are you into Pokemon? I guess you're not into Pokemon because you'd know. But
I was reasonably into Pokemon, but it's one of those things like I'm not old at all, but it's one of those things like at one point I was just like, I've lost track. What is going on? What has been released? It's just because it's just so much. Like now we've got 150 new Pokemon. Now there's islands, and now there's yeah, not owning any 3DS or any DS console didn't help either. But yeah.
Well, I just love that even Pokemon now is doing these like crazy updates, and they're not even hiding it. It's not like they call different names. It's literally here's 2016 Sun and Moon. We're going to call it Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. It's like, oh well. I mean, I guess it's a good way. Look, people love Pokemon, right?
Yeah.
But in many ways, I saw it and I was like, I don't see it like this. Again, this is me poking the bear, but I was a bit like, is this not kind of what EA have done? Like, kinda, isn't it? Like, where's the same game, but you want a bit more, you got to pay another 40 quid for it. I don't know. And I think that's where the line started to blur for me a little bit, because I was like, I don't. It's interesting what is right and what is wrong in modern day video games. I'm not saying they are doing that, and I know that I know a Pokemon fan that it went absolutely ballistic for this, and that's all that matters. If you're getting entertainment out of it, don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. But I was a bit like, isn't it interesting the way that things are perceived?
Yeah, it's also the name attached. I'm not saying, not why these people would be like Nintendo has double standards, but Nintendo are far less likely if they're releasing Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which they have branded as Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Like, that is the Ultra version of the existing games, rather than EA releasing anything. So yeah, I think it's not double standards as such. I think it's just like you say, it is interesting public perception. But Nintendo have earned a good public perception. It's not like they had that gifted to them. Like, they're usually very good with their releases.
I totally agree.
Shows.
I say that to a lot of people, because even though I do rag about them a lot on my YouTube channel, secretly I'm a massive Nintendo fan. I love them with all of my heart. And
it's just easy to poke the fan base. It's just very easy.
Yeah, it is. That's why I wind up Final Fantasy fans as well. Like, I've actually got no problem with Final Fantasy, but it's so easy, Sam. It's so easy.
Yeah.
But no, I totally agree with you, and I've said that to people. They don't necessarily agree, but I think Nintendo have earned that reputation, because mostly when they make mistakes as well, they do try and rectify them, I find. Or they are more forthcoming, and that's not to say they haven't screwed up. Look at the Wii U. What the hell was that? But I think that's fair, and I'm glad that you said that, because a lot of people they don't see it that way.
It depends on the era as well. Like, the Wii U wasn't trying to be bad, you know what I mean? It wasn't malicious. Whereas like the stuff
marketed.
Like with loot boxes and everything, it seems unplayer friendly, it seems selfish, it seems greedy. But I don't think you'd really catch Nintendo doing stuff overtly like that.
No.
And and their mistakes, like you say, have been rectified. Like the Wii U, and which wasn't really even a mistake. It had a lot of good games, just wasn't as well received as they would have liked. But yeah, no, I think they have definitely earned a good reputation.
No, I totally agree. And we still got some good stuff. I just looked it up now because I was intrigued. Like, so you usually think now is the era or the time when games kind of fall away for the rest of the year. But actually, I mean, I'm not going to say these are huge releases, and a lot of them obviously updates. But we've got Doom coming out on PlayStation VR on December 1st. I played a bit of that. I tell you, that is some good shit.
As a side note, did that make you feel sick at all? Because I imagine it's really fast.
No. I mean, the way they have changed it a bit, though, because you don't really... You kind of... This is going to sound weird, but it's really hard to explain. You don't really move fluidly. Okay. You kind of teleport around the place. So... you have like this blue light, and when you shine the light, and
the teleport, okay.
Yeah. But it sounds awful, but it actually works really well, because the monsters are it's just so cool. I'm not sure you'll be able to play that for 8 hours, but in terms of a few hours experience, oh my gosh, is it fun. But then obviously you've got Fallout VR as well, so Bethesda is smashing it. But also at the very end of the year, just to remind you about how good the start of the year was, you get Resident Evil 7 Gold Edition. And I know a lot of people shit all over Resident Evil 7. I thought it was great. I thought that was a really, really good...
It's my game of the year.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's how we'll round this podcast up. Tell me why it's your game of the year. I mean, I kind of know, but I want you to tell me anyway.
Well, I think it's just like... Resident Evil has sort of not been that high held in regard with after 7 and 5, and a lot of games that moved into action. But this was all about putting you in the vulnerable position. Like, you are at threat here. You have very limited ammo. That is really limited ammo, like, even within level, and you are just running from these people who are like terrorizing you in the most horrific ways. And it was survival horror at its very best. And it was the case of, like, sometimes you might even need to reload if you were in if you're playing on hard and you're in a late spot, you might just not be able to complete it because you'd run out of bullets. And that feeling of putting you against the ropes at all times, and a really confined and focused experience as well. Like, the last third of the game, I won't spoil it, but the last third of the game loses a little bit of that, but it was necessary to tie the story up. Yeah. And overall, it's just scary. Like that opening is just horrific, and like in VR as well. Just yeah, it was so unbelievably like atmospheric, and yeah, I think it was just a really really tightly woven experience, and really interesting as well. Like the story that has been bolstered by the DLC as well is really good. And I actually haven't heard anyone say bad things about it. So I'm really interested as to when you say that people are saying bad things about it. I'm like, who is saying bad things?
I would never name names because I know that guy. However,
I mean, I'm not actually asking, but
well, I'm going to tell you anyway. So, but the bit you mentioned, which we won't spoil, the last third, we'll call it. Yeah. That's where I heard a lot of criticisms, and I didn't necessarily agree because I thought that it was clever in the sense that I imagine they want to do a sequel. And I imagine they would like to reuse the formula. And I thought by making the change when they did make the change, without saying anything else, actually allowed them to do that, if that makes sense. I actually thought that changes the atmosphere. And now when you do go back to that, which I presume you will, you've actually been very smart here. And I thought it was a very good design decision. And also, I thought Capcom were awesome for having the balls to be like, you know what? That PT game was really good. They're not making it. We'll make it. And I respect that. It's like active reloading Gears. Nobody stole it. Everybody should have stole it. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. Just as a quick aside, did you play the DLC?
I played one of them, and I'm trying to It was the one where, I can't remember which one. I think it's... I can't remember it, but yes, I did. I did play one of them. It's useless because I can't give you any more information than that. But I played one of them, and it was excellent. And which one did you play them all? I guess
I dipped into bits of them because one of them was one where the mother locked you up in a room, and you had to, when she left, you had to try and figure your way out. But if she came in and anything was changed, you'd get like killed. So you'd have to find out everything, and when she came back, put everything back in its place.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean,
and it was really clever, but I got so annoyed with it.
Yeah, I couldn't handle that. Yeah.
And but the best one for me is when you saw Zoe and the family before the events of Resident Evil 7.
That's the one I played. That's the one I played.
That was so good, so amazing, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Capcom smashed it with that. I really did, and I actually. And maybe we'll have to have you back on, Sam. We'll just do a Resident Evil episode because you're clearly into it. I liked Resident Evil 5.
I like Resident Evil 5 because it's more 4, which is good.
Exactly. I'd say this as well. And only because of the way I played it, I actually preferred 5 to 4. But we'll get into that another time. I don't want to get yelled at right now. I don't want to get into it right now. I get yelled at enough on the internet. But maybe we'll do a Resident Evil episode down the line. But I'm really glad you said that about Resident Evil because I do think it's that awful curse of you came out in January, therefore everybody has forgotten about you. But I think it was I honestly think it was one of the most solid start to finish games I played all year. I didn't really think I had any dips. I wouldn't say maybe it didn't hit the highs of some other games, but from start to finish, I thought it was really good.
And it's one of those games that had a month to itself. Like if you were like, what else came out in January? I would be like, no idea.
No idea. Some indie game with sad piano or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I got no idea. Okay. Well, on that note, Sam, I thank you very much for coming on the Week in Gaming, especially the comeback episode as well. I know I will also apologise to the people that do tweet me and send me messages daily going, Miller, why can't you keep to a schedule to save your life? Which is fair, but hopefully I'm gonna prove them all wrong now. If anybody wants to come yell at you about games, Sam, can they find you on the internet anywhere? Twitter, Facebook, anything like that?
I can't remember my Twitter handle. Maybe you could put it in the video description.
Right, that's what I'll do. If you're watching this on YouTube, it will go up on YouTube, youtube.com/The Miller Report. Look in the description. You'll have Sam's Twitter. Also, if you're listening on iTunes or whatever, have a look in the description. Sam's Twitter will be there, and you can send him a message going, I can't believe you like Resident Evil 7. You're a terrible person. And Sam will love that because everybody loves that kind of stuff. Well, Sam, I want to thank you for coming on. I also want to thank you for supporting the Patreon. I mean, you were incredibly generous, so I can't say thank you enough.
It's my pleasure.
But we should also definitely do a follow-up episode when you're free. So let me know, and we can come crashing back onto the Week in Gaming. So yes, if you'd like to come on, you can visit patreon.com/SimonMiller316. If nothing else, please do tweet me at SimonMiller316 on there. This will be on iTunes, YouTube, whatever Google does, Android nonsense is everywhere. I know it's not on Spotify. That's the other thing I get. Miller, put the flipping podcast on Spotify. You just have to email Spotify, and they decide whether they want you. And right now, they don't want me, which is very heartbreaking. It's like my parents all over again. That's a joke. It's like, so
wow.
That was a joke. That was a joke. I will, if my dad's listening in, I'm sorry, I take it back. I will, yes, I will endeavour to get it up there. But if you have a podcast app of choice, drop me a line at Simon316 and I'll get it on there as best as I can. Sam, thank you very much for joining me, and everybody else, just have lovely, lovely gaming weeks, and I'll chat to you soon.